More than 2 million people have already voted in the two Senate runoffs in Georgia, which, if you compare it with the presidential election, is just 7% lower. 10 days after early voting began, we had 2.21 million people vote in the presidential election. Now we have 2.06 million people voted in the Senate runoffs, which is kind of an amazing turnout for a runoff. We are still off by 7%, but it's not so bad that the runoff has already tilted in favor of one party. Georgia had a Senate runoff in 2008 when 2.13 million people voted. But you know how many people voted in the presidential election that year? 3.9 million. So on November 4th, 3.9 million people turned out to vote for Obama and McCain. And less than 30 days later, on December 2nd, just 2.13 million turned out to vote for the race between Chambliss and Martin. 1.7 million people who voted in the presidential election in 2008 did not turn out to vote in the Senate runoffs. And the net result was Obama lost the race to McCain by 200,000 votes, while the Democrat lost the Senate race to the Republican by 318,000 votes. When the voter base shrinks in a state like Georgia, it moves the race towards the party that held the power for a long time. And in this case, it will be the Republican Party. I will kind of agree with anyone who says it's actually a little too early to say that this trend benefits either of the two parties. But having said that, I will also add this. This trend is also showing that the Republicans are not running away with the two seats despite their enormous cash advantage and color advantage. People in Georgia have kept the Senate race wide open with 10 more days left for the final election day. And there is one demographic that is doing everything it can to give both Raphael Warnock and Jon Ossoff a fighting chance in this race. And that demographic is the number of people who did not vote in the presidential election but have decided to vote in the Senate runoffs. Nearly 65,000 people who did not vote in this year's presidential election have already voted in the Senate runoffs. And the best news is more than half of those voters are people of color, which means Democrats are now leading within this brand new block of voters. It's a given that both the races are going to be decided by less than 2%. And I think it will be well below 100,000 votes that's going to separate both the parties. So even small movements within the voting blocks will make a huge difference to the outcome of this election. And there is one more good news on the way. In the presidential election, African American voters accounted for 27% of the total votes that were cast. So far, African Americans account for 31.5% of the overall votes cast in the Senate runoffs. Around 1.3 to 1.4 million African Americans voted in the presidential election. The key for the Democrats is to keep the number at that level and, if possible, go beyond it. So far, we have 650,000 African Americans cast their ballots in the Senate race. So exactly at the halfway point in this election, we have half the required number of African American votes. Asian Americans also preferred Biden over Trump with a 2-1 margin. So closer to 140,000 Asian Americans voted in the presidential election. So far in the runoffs, the number is around 50,000 Asian Americans. It's slightly behind in turnout when compared to African Americans, but still way better than the 60,000 Asian Americans who turned out in 2016. So if you ask me to summarize, then I will say this. The race is not over yet, and all the numbers are looking healthy with some catching up to do with Asian Americans. If this momentum can be sustained over the next 10 days, then the Democrats can win the race with a small margin. The Democrats have to lock the race before it heads into the final day of voting because most of the election day voters are going to be Republican voters. We need 1 million plus African American votes by that time, more than 100,000 Asian American votes, and more than 1 million mail-in ballots locked and loaded before January 4th. As of today, we are looking good, very good to get closer to all those numbers I just rattled off. It will be down to the Democratic ground game to sustain the current pace. I will keep updating as the numbers keep coming in. Please subscribe to the channel as I will continue my coverage on Georgia. Thanks for watching.